Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Intruder Theatre in the Making podcast. I'm your host, Remi Rachuba, and thank you so much for tuning in. Now, one more thing before we continue. If you would like to help me financially, you can become a sponsor and a patron of the podcast for less than a coffee. That is £1 a month. You can help me with the hosting company's costs because the podcast is on Buzzsprout, and that's a hosting company and they host podcasts. So I would be very, very grateful for that. And all the details you can find on my website, remirachuba.com. And I will also put the link in the podcast description. So thank you so much. Now, in the previous episode, I talked about 4.5 rehearsed readings of Intruder that I did in 2018. And I hope some theatre makers found it useful and maybe can use my experience in their processes when they work on their own plays or on their own projects. Now, as I always say, I'm not an expert, but I share my experience, which may be useful, helpful to some other artists. One of the things that I didn't mention in the previous episodes, and it dawned on me just recently, was the fact that we went through a title change when we were doing the rehearsed readings. As you might remember, initially the English version of the solo piece was titled The Visitor. Then when I was translating the English version into Polish, I thought, what kind of title could it have? And because we don't have an equivalent of the Visitor, I mean, we do, but it sounds really weird, I then decided to have a Polish title as Intruz. So when we were advertising the rehearsed readings, it was under The Visitor Intruz. And I think initially when we went for the reading at the King's Head Theatre, that's how it was advertised. However, later on for further readings, there was a change. And I think when we discussed it with Martha of Asylum Theatre, she also suggested, which I had been thinking about, she said maybe we could change The Visitor into Intruder, and I thought, you know what, that's a great idea, why don't we go with that? So within a couple of days, The Visitor was changed into The Intruder, and the Polish title was Intruz, which I think is great and sounds more ominous, so we kept that title, well, these two titles, and later on we got rid of The Intruder, so now it's Intruder Intruz. So 2018 was a very interesting year, especially the second half, which was very, very fruitful and allowed me to test the piece with various audiences. And encouraged by such a warm reception and the feedback, I was very confident and enthusiastic about 2019, especially as I was thinking, wow, since it went so well, we are definitely going to Fringe 19, and there is no stopping us. And at the beginning of 2019, I was on my way to London from Poland, where I spent my Christmas. I got an email from Martha of Asylum Theatre. You might remember I talked about Martha in the previous episode. Martha is a Polish director and producer, Edinburgh-based, and she has her own company in Edinburgh called Asylum Theatre. And I've known her for, I think, 11 or 12 years. We always got on well, and I always thought, wow, you know what, she would be perfect for my project. She would do a very good job producing it. So we discussed submitting a funding application where Martha would be a leading person. And that application needed to be submitted, I think, by the 6th of January. And then when I was going back to London from Poland, I got an email from Martha telling me that she would like to withdraw from the project, which was very alarming because that meant that I needed to submit that huge funding application by myself. And I had never done it before. I thought, well, I don't really know what to do. So, of course, I did my best. I spent 3 days working on it, and I submitted it, but of course, the application came negative a couple of weeks or maybe a month later. But that was this very first sign that maybe 2019 was not going like I was thinking it should go. And the other thing that happened was, and I talked about it in the previous episode, was that I got out of all these rehearsed readings and inviting various industry professionals, I got an invitation to audition at the Globe. Now, when I got that email, I was very, very excited because I don't have an agent, so it's not an easy thing for me to get an audition at the Globe just like that. And they wanted to see me for a tour of 3 Shakespeare plays, and the tour was to take place all over the world over, I think, 6 months, which was extremely exciting. And I spent the whole weekend with Shakespeare, literally, sleeping with the 3 plays, and it was an interesting weekend. I did go and I did my best, and I met the team. I didn't get the part, but it was really, really lovely to be given that opportunity because I love Shakespeare and I would love to do more Shakespeare. And really getting that wonderful feedback from them was just really an icing on the cake. But it was one of these interesting things that I will remember for a very long time. When that audition came, I was very conflicted. I was really thinking, I don't know what to do. Should I do Intruder or should I do the tour? Although I haven't been to the audition yet. I don't know, I was so focused on Intruder and the Fringe and thinking that it's going to happen that I couldn't for some reason let go of this idea of not doing it. I was already thinking, like, I got that part. Like, what am I supposed to do now? And then I needed to explain to myself, well, you haven't got the part yet, so why are you worrying about what's going to happen? Get it first, and then you will see. Now, it's only now that I can think about it. If I had a similar situation at the moment, where I have a project that I'm thinking is going to happen in 6 months, but there is no money, no funding, nothing is set in stone, and I have another project that is looking very promising, I would definitely be focusing on the project that looks very promising and is very specific, rather than just thinking of, what's going to happen. I think it was due to the fact that I was so focused and I couldn't let go of Intruder, and I was so encouraged by the rehearsed readings that for some reason I couldn't let go of I couldn't let go of the thought of not doing Intruder at the Fringe 19. That's interesting. I definitely would be treating it differently at the moment. Anyway, Martha leaving the project, I don't get the funding, I don't get the job at the Globe, and the only thing that I'm focusing on is, looking for a producer. And this is why I decided to call this episode From Dreams to Reality. Because dreams are dreams, but then actually, reality calls, and it's not as wonderful, and it's not as easy as it would seem. And I needed to face reality. I needed to find someone, a producer, who would look at my project from that financial point of view, who would look after it. And when I started looking for a producer, I threw myself up there. I didn't know much about that. I didn't know anything about producing. It was like I threw myself into water, and I wanted to learn how to swim by myself. And there would be various people swimming next to me, and kind of they were telling me what to do, what not to do, and what movements I should do and I shouldn't do, and how to move forward. And that's how I learned it, and you will find out what happened. So I thought to myself, it's February, let's give it maybe a month and a half to find a producer who would help me get to the Fringe 2019. Although it was only 5 or 6 months left, no money, no team. What was I thinking? So how did I go about finding a producer? Well, that was a very interesting process. So I prepared some kind of an advert where I talked about my work, where I talked about the piece, Marcus and his work, and I mentioned that I'm looking for someone who would look after the project from that financial point of view. And I posted it on Facebook, and on Facebook there was 2 groups. One of them is called Admin Monkeys, and the other one is UK Producers. And when I posted the advert, one of the very first things that I started receiving was messages in the messenger from various people with one question: what is the fee? And I was actually quite confused. I was thinking, what do they mean? What is the fee? The fee for the producer? The fee for the project? I didn't have any money, so I couldn't offer them any fees. And I remember that one of the admins of the group, I think she messaged me and she said, Remi, could you be more specific in your advert and mention that there is a fee attached, and if you have a fee, maybe you can mention that, because people don't like to have these messages that are very unclear. So when people started messaging me, what is the fee, then it kind of clicked that, well, people want to know how much they're going to be paid, which is fair enough, which I didn't understand at that time. And I would say that, well, you know what, the fee for the project, the fee for what? And people came back and said, well, fee for the project. What's your hourly rate? I didn't have a rate because I didn't have any money. I would say that I would like to maybe ask the person to write a funding application, something which I was dreading, just the thought of it. And then they would ask, yes, but what is your fee for that application? And I didn't have a fee. And then people would say to me, well, I am not really interested. And that was really it. So that was the feedback from Facebook. So if I were doing it again, I would be very aware of the fact that people want to know how much you're going to pay them, what is their rate, what they will have to do. But I didn't know it at that time. This is why I was learning to swim. The other thing that I did was I contacted Arts Council England, and they run, I think, a section there that is for it's like a job search. And they placed my ad on it, and from that I got a couple of emails, but it was mainly from people who were maybe actors or theatre managers who didn't have a lot of producing experience. So it was great to get these emails, but it wasn't something that I was really interested in. However, the lady from Arts Council England, she suggested that I contact the Fringe office and actually ask them for a list of producers. And I did that, and within the next couple of days I got an email from the Fringe office. I think it was an Excel sheet with the names of producers, where they were based, the contact information and direct email address, what work they produce, what shows they produced, and what kind of work they were interested in. And I think that was the best resource I got. And I emailed people individually. I mean, I had this advert prepared, so most of the time I did copy and paste, just changing the name. And from these emails, I got an idea of what people actually do. So when I was talking about the Facebook Messenger, where people were just asking me what's the fee, here, when people were emailing me back, people were clearer about their work and what they do. And this is how I found out about producers. So someone would be saying to me that, you've done most of the work and it's wonderful. However, I like to work on a project from the very beginning. So this project wouldn't be for me, which was interesting. And I think it's creative producers that do that. Some people told me that they're only interested in booking shows or being a tour manager. That was interesting. Some people told me that they are not interested, but they would recommend their friend and they would attach their email address, which was very kind. So from these emails, I learned how it all works, what people do. Of course, need to bear in mind that people emailed me that. However, when they were interested, the question was, what is the fee? And because there was no fee, and by that time I kind of had an idea of what I wanted, I would say that, I would like them to write that funding application. And people would say, oh, so that means that you don't have a fee. The funding application and the result of that would be the fee when we get the funding. And I would say yes. And people would say, no, I am not interested in that. I would like to be paid for filling in that funding application, rather than, I'm not going to do it for free, which now I understand, but then at that time I couldn't. I just thought that doesn't make a lot of sense, to be quite honest. There would be people that would be emailing me and telling me that it's a wonderful project, but they don't have the capacity to take the project on, which was actually quite interesting because this is the very first time where I learned the word capacity. I normally would be asking people, are you free? And people would come back and say, no, I don't have the capacity. Anyone who wants to approach a producer to work on a project, please remember that word, the capacity. Do you have any capacity to work? That was something that I learned. So I was emailing people back and forth, finding out, learning about producers, what kind of producers, creative producers, tour managers, producers. It was definitely a very interesting process, but all of these emails were coming negative, saying that people didn't have the capacity, that it was quite late. It was already the beginning of March, and the Fringe, because that's what I was talking about, was to take place in August. So in 5 months, no team, no funding. I mean, really, Remi, what were you thinking? But I was pushing through, and of course I was asking my friends, but I also looked for various productions. I actually Googled Polish productions in the UK, and I found one that was produced by an English lady, and she did a little tour of that Polish play here, I think, in London a couple of years ago, and I found it and I emailed her because I thought, you know what, maybe she could tell me how it works with Polish audiences. Maybe she would be interested in it since she worked on another Polish show. Her name was Akua. And I emailed her, but I didn't hear from her at that time. So it's mid-March, I don't have a producer, no money, no funding. Of course, I was very upset and disappointed that, we're not going ahead with the Fringe. Which, of course, from today's point of view, I'm thinking, that was the wise thing to do. You should have made that decision a long time ago. But that's from today's point of view, 2021 and 2019. No, I didn't know anything about that. I discussed it with Marcus, and we said, you know what, this is it. There was nothing we can do about that. We need to cancel Fringe 19 because we don't have any resources. One of the funniest things that happened out of that search for a producer was when I was emailing all sorts of people and friends and actors that I worked with or just colleagues. I emailed Mark Wood, and if you remember, Mark Wood is an actor I worked on Intruder back in 2012 when I received funding from Creative Scotland. So I put my advert and whether he knew someone, and then within the next couple of days I got an email from a guy at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland who prepares an e-newsletter, and he says to me, Remi, I would be delighted to place your advert in our newsletter. And I thought, how does he know about my advert? I never emailed him. How did I make a mistake? How did that happen? I never emailed him. And then I thought about it and I thought, I was emailing Mark Wood, the actor, but the guy that prepares the e-newsletter, his name is Mark as well. So my inbox, when I was composing that email, did autofill. But because I had been emailing that guy from the e-newsletter recently, my inbox did autofill and, put his email address there. That's why the advert went to the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. So when he emailed me, I thought, you know what, fuck it, let's do it. Let's put that advert in the newsletter, which actually surprisingly was a very good thing, because a few days later I received an email from an acting graduate, Matt McGill, who was New York based and venturing into producing. And Matt became part of the team. I spoke to him a couple of times. I introduced him to Marcus, and we completed a couple of theatre festivals applications together, three of us. I think we did Voila, a festival in London, and then I think Wide Bear Theatre New Writing Festival. We completed it online, or we did a Zoom and we did it together, which was very, very nice, and I thoroughly enjoyed speaking with him because he is a very nice person. However, at some point I was thinking that if I want to go, or if I find someone or look for someone to do my funding application, I need to have a person that is definitely local, so someone who lives in here and who has experience in submitting funding applications. And with Matt, the thing was, he was New York based, and then I was thinking, even if we did have an application, I would need someone who can get in touch with the venue when it's needed. If I it would be great to have someone who is here and I could get in touch right away, and New York is 5 hours behind. So that kind of thinking was the main reason why we decided to part ways. But the other reason was that Matt didn't have a lot of experience with funding applications, and I really needed someone that could help me secure the funding, because I was still thinking that, well, I am going to find someone at some point. So we decided to part ways, but I am still in touch with Matt. He is a lovely guy, and hopefully when we come to New York and when we plan the tour of Intruder in America, we can work together, and I strongly believe that we would do it. And one of the things that I'm very grateful to Matt for is that he reminded me of Basia Binkowska. And Basia is a set designer, Polish, graduated from the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, and I had been in touch with her before Matt's involvement in the project. However, I completely forgot about her, and it was only when I was speaking to Matt he asked me if I knew Basia, and I said yes, of course. And I really don't know why I hadn't emailed and asked her about the project, but life goes on and you forget about things. They knew each other because they were studying at the conservatoire at the same time, and even, I think, worked on the same production. So I emailed her. She initially said yes, but I wasn't sure because she had other projects on the go. And then when I re-emailed her a couple of months later, she agreed to help us with Intruder, which was great. So Matt is out of question, and when I finished talking to him, I really had a very big dilemma, and I really didn't know what to do. The major thing was the funding, and I was so conflicted because I really didn't know how to go about it. I didn't know who to ask, and because I knew, okay, well, if I go and ask, someone would like to probably be paid for that piece of advice. Some people recommended certain people, especially some producers from Scotland, and I was speaking to them and I was seeking their advice, and they were telling me, yeah, you can go for funding to Creative Scotland. I am based in England, so it's conflicting, these two funding bodies. When you live in Scotland, you can put your Scottish address and go for money in Scotland. When you are in England, you go to Arts Council England. So even if I went to Scotland, even if I went for Scottish funding, it would have to be put through someone who was based in Scotland. So someone would have to fill in that application, and I would probably have to pay them to do that, which I really wasn't prepared, and I didn't have money to do that. But I was exploring different options. I found Creative Scotland. They told me about their funding, and I was very, very much confused. I really didn't know what to do because I was here in London. The director was also in London, and I was thinking, why would I go for funding to Scotland? Maybe it would be the funding here. So even if I had a producer that would finally agree, I was still thinking about it, to work on the application, it would be here. And that was that gut feeling telling me that maybe we should go along the lines of applying and going to Arts Council England, that we should secure the funding here, maybe do some kind of a tour here. This is the way we can get some funding. That was some kind of an idea that I had at some point, that maybe it should be here rather than Scotland. And I remember it was, I think, maybe July or June 2019. I was in Old Street in my favorite coffee place, Look Mum No Hands, where I very often feel like I'm plugged into some kind of creative current, to be quite honest. And I had this moment when I was very helpless. I really didn't know what to do. I was just on the phone with Creative Scotland and I was so confused. I didn't know where to go with my piece, how to go about funding, how to go about money. I was just so perplexed and puzzled. Really, I was really lost. I didn't know what to do. And once again, I emailed a lot of my colleagues and friends, asking them for help and saying, you know what, maybe someone knows someone who could help me, because I really don't know what to do about the funding, and there was nobody that could help me. And yes, I was really out of my depth. And when I was sitting in Look Mum No Hands, emailing my friends and colleagues and copying and pasting and hoping that someone would help me, all of a sudden I got an email that changed quite a lot of things for me. But what it was and who that email was from, that's what I'm going to talk about in the next episode of Intruder Theatre in the Making podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay safe, stay well, and I speak to you next time. Bye for now.